Hello again. I promised you a panel session in this track when I introduced the track back at 9 o'clock this morning, and that's going to take place right now. Skill sets for transformation. That's the title of this panel session, and it's going to be helmed and moderated by my esteemed colleague, Joe Lombardo. So I think Joe would now probably be a familiar face to many of you if you've been here since yesterday morning. But Joe is director at ESP Consult. And I'm going to leave this in the very, very capable hands of Joe Lombardo to take this panel session forward. Thank you, Joe.
Thank you very much, Bob, for that kind introduction. And welcome to all of you listening to this panel on skill sets for transformation. And it gives me great pleasure to introduce my panel, who come from diverse sector of industry. Starting off with Sanjay Desai, the Regional Director for Talent Management at Humana International, part of the MRI Group. And I must also congratulate Sanjay for winning the award of, what was the award again for, Sanjay?
Supply Chain Champion, thank you.
There you are, thank you. So Supply Chain Champion, so we're privileged to have you on board. We have Amos, who's the managing partner at Hatch Asia Consulting PT Limited. We have Kyle Hegarty, Managing Director of Leadership Nomad, a division of TSL Marketing PTE. We have Nicole Tretwer, Head of Logistics of APAC at Swarovski. And we have Wayne Yoshida, Supply Chain Management, Logistics and Transportation Director at FocusCore. Welcome to all of you, and thank you for taking the time to join us in this very interesting panel. I encourage all the listeners to please throw your questions to this panel, because we have a lot of interesting skills and knowledge out there. So let me start off straight away with looking at skill sets. Skill sets can be very diverse. The understanding of what they are and how to identify them for purpose is often quite challenging. Let me start off by asking Sanjay, how would you distinguish between skills and competencies, and why is the distinction relevant?
Thank you, Joe. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, LogiSYM, and welcome all the delegates. And thank you for giving your precious time today to join this. Good question, Joe. Generally, the skills and competencies in a colloquial manner are interchanged. And actually, that is where the problem starts, right? There is a high chance of a wrong hire or a wrong promotion or losing a high potential talent. And let us understand the differences. Competencies are part of human behaviors. They have a contextual meaning, and they are much broader and overarching, right? They help the organization to build strategies, roadmaps over a much wider and longer horizon. Right. Whereas skill sets or skills are a subset of the competencies, the other two being knowledge and ability is actually called a KS. Skills are very specific to a task or a job. Right. Skills are generally quantifiable, as well as they are transferable across many different roles. Skills is an ability of an individual to do a task on the ground. There are two broad types of skills, hard skill and soft skill. Let's not talk about it. Now, let us understand the relevance to each other, right? Competencies help an organization to build vision, mission, and goals. These goals then actually drive the behavior, the change in the number of employees in the organization to use their skill sets and training for the organization to stabilize, improve, and eventually transform. This is such a critical element, right?
Great. Thank you. Sanjay, that's fantastic introduction. I'll come back to you in a minute. Can I bring Amos on this point as well? Your take on the difference between skills and competencies, and how relevant is the distinction in this area?
I think Sanjay has given a very clear competencies definition. Right. I just want to add on to skills, which every individual talent brings within an organization. It's within themselves. So how it evolves into strengths, I want to just go a little bit a step further. It's because they have invested time in that skills, perfecting that craft, investing in the changing process, and putting effort into it. That has defined skills at a different level, at a deeper level.
Okay, that's great, Amos. And while on the line, can I also ask you, how effective is it to measure skills or competency, and how important can this be for organizational alignment in a transformation process?
The effectiveness looks at both spectrum of employer-employee. What you think you are good at and what I think you are good at. So that's two views of it. the key point here is because transformation, it's fluid, it's ever present. What we have seen that works yesterday may not work today, right? So that requirements of transformation then pose a challenge because the workforce becomes very disengaged.
Okay.
So when organization transform, there needs to be a purpose in putting people within that decision of transformation. What I mean is that we don't just identify the gap as a prescriptive, take that opportunity to look at the broader term, rethink employee engagement model that create meaningful learning journey for employee, build a higher engaged workforce, because research have shown a higher engaged workforce improve productivity, and they will then perform and work with you within the transformation journey. You don't want to lose that talent within the transformation journey.
Excellent. That's very good insight. Wayne, from your perspective, obviously you're working in a different zone in Japan. How do you see a measurement of skill sets, and how important are they in alignment and transformation in the perimeter you're working in?
I have to echo what Amos is saying as well. And in the recruitment industry, we see about 3 out of 4 candidates are willing to apply on roles that they don't have the skills for. But on the other side, we have about 84% of the clients that are willing to hire and then train for the skills. So it's really really important to identify the key soft skill or the key hard skills to go forward for our industry anyway.
Okay, that's very interesting. So one of the last points of this cluster is, what are the critical factors to achieve an engaging and motivational employee experience that can influence outcomes and deliver results? Amos has alluded to that a moment ago about the motivational factors and looking at how this can be achieved. But when we look at influencing outcomes, making changes lasting, how do we achieve that? Now, Kyle hasn't joined us yet. He was going to take this lead here. Sanjay, do you want to just step in and give your view on that? I know you haven't prepared you on that, but what do you think about this point about influencing outcomes and the results?
Excellent. So when you talk about influencing outcome and result, that leads to a much better clarity. What is expected of me as an employee, and what level of the organization and the transformational change that I'm contributing to. And when I know that as my function or as my role, I have a very clear set of guidelines and expected outcomes. Then as an employee, I can define my own methodology, how to achieve it. I can go about in a very collaborative manner within my ecosystems. I can present it to the management and actually work to that, to those levers. So having that clarity is very eminent for me as a worker on the ground.
Okay, clarity and objective, excellent. Nicole, what's your view on that? Because obviously this is a very important factor. Employee experience today is becoming more and more priority.
Yes, absolutely, Joe. So I think what I want to add to Sanjay is, to Sanjay's ideas is, more often than not, companies are undergoing a transformation, and maybe the executive management knows exactly where they want to go, but triggering that idea down to the front line, a lot gets lost in translation. And I think there's a lot of ambiguity for people when the company is in transformation. Many people don't know if they're going to have a job tomorrow. Right. And signaling that into the company is really, really important. And you need to drive that transformation from the people. If you give people the feeling that this is something that's going to happen with or without them, without at least trying to give them the feeling that they're on board with this, that they're doing this transformation together with you as a company, you will lose your best talent first.
Right. So leading off from there, Nicole, what are the most common pitfalls that organizations are finding themselves when managing the skills? I mean, you talked about the gap between the top, the middle, and the bottom. So they're struggling, but what are you doing about that to move it forward?
So I think some of the pitfalls that I've seen or looked at is a lot of the time managing skills. And that's that, right? And then that data sits there. So there's a lot of effort done from the company to record the required skills, to analyze if there's skills gaps, and then what happens with that data? Is it executed on, right? This brings me to the next point, that skills are just happen. Companies are not investing. It's operational expenses. Nobody likes them. So actually putting that money on the table, to bring those skill sets into the company is another area where I think that's a big pitfall, right? Then, also assuming that the managers in the team have the capabilities, and here we come, skills capabilities, have the capabilities to encourage their team to develop those skills and make them understand why those skills are going to be important.
Right.
The biggest pitfall that I see is that companies are not clear where they're going to be heading in the midterm, and they're not developing the skill sets now that they will need in 2 to 3 years. That is the biggest problem. And then we come to this classical hire fire situation where you lose so much knowledge in your companies,
right,
because you have to let people go because they don't have the skill set that you could have trained for 3 years earlier.
So you're talking about the gaps, you're talking about a short-sightedness, you're talking about sort of not looking at investing for the longer term. Amos, could I bring you on this point as well? Because obviously the gaps that you're seeing at the middle part and the investment action, what are you seeing, and what needs to be done more with companies who are struggling?
I think the gap at the C is their way of seeing opportunity to address, because like I said earlier on, it's prescriptive, right? So if they looking at ahead from what I met, so there was an article that I read from McKinsey. It says that by 2030, we'll see a higher shift for automation. That means 50% of increase in automation.
Right.
So that transformation workforce will need to be, or will have a need for more social and emotional skills. That's a clarity as a leader that you need to give. You need to give the autonomy back to the employees and allow them to plan their destiny, where they want to go. So the focus for organization then will be to create a more highly engaged environment for employees to thrive. Relook into the workforce planning, where career progression may no longer be horizontal, vertical, but it can be spiral. You're going to bring them to many different places. There are excitement along the way, but they decide where they want to go.
Okay, Amos, that's a very good point, which leads me to the next point I want to ask you is, how do you define these skill sets to align talents and basically define the expected roles? You're saying let people do what they need and define, but how do you align? Where's the leadership for alignment in this letting people do what they like, developing the employee experience? It's not as easy as it sounds, is it?
It's difficult, primarily because you're always looking at the issues that you're having now, the competition that you're having now, but not looking at a more agility transformation process. Okay. Because every time as you transform, there will definitely be changes along that. Right. And when there are changes, do you then put your employees within that framework to work with you? And that's appreciating the strengths that they have and not the weakness that they have.
Okay. So, Nicole, can I bring you back in on this? Because leadership is very important. And we talked about the gaps, the alignment, the people expectations. Where is the gap in leadership? Where is leadership in this whole matrix of developing skills?
Yeah. So, I mean, I think this brings us back to, is leadership a skill or is it a capability, right?
What do you think it is?
Is it... I think the gap here is that, first of all, we're people, right? We have a lot of cognitive biases. We have confirmation biases. We have, all these different biases that we bring with us. We are assuming that because we are convinced of an idea, we're automatically assuming that Amos and Sanjay and Wayne are just going to agree with me because it makes sense to me, right? And at the time, people are going to be on a completely different path, and they're going to just shake their heads and see, I don't see where this company is going, right? So leadership skills between communication and getting the team, the people involved on a personal level with the transformation, I think that's the biggest gap I see.
Okay, let me bring a question in from Tojo Mukherjee. The entire concept of what is for me is very critical for transformation, especially in the change management side of things. But most organizations may not have full-time transformation teams. How can fresh hires help? Sanjay, this is a question I'd like to bring to you, because it's like saying, okay, I will only change if there are transformation teams, and bringing fresh hires in will solve the problem. Is it really going to be that simple? Sorry, can't hear you, Sanjay. You're mute.
Yeah, no, absolutely not. And I completely disagree with that thought process of if I bring in new hires, it actually builds efficiency in a transformational phase. Not
Right.
at all. Actually, from a transformation perspective, Joe, I'm still a bit more missionary kind of a guy. So I would actually go back to the whiteboard. I would go back to the best employees that I have. I'll draw a big picture, and then blow it into a smaller picture, create a leadership, create a change management champion leader, and then actually drive the whole agenda. In that, if at a ground level, if there is a place for young guys to bring in technology prowess and do certain things, automate certain efficiencies, absolutely yes. But
Right.
not as a matter of a principle that I would bring in young guys or young leaders in the organization thinking fresh blood is always better. It
Absolutely
doesn't
right.
work that way.
I fully agree. Yeah, Kyle has joined us. Kyle, you've heard the question, I presume, about bringing transformation teams and fresh hires. What is your view from the leadership point of view? We're trying to argue the point about leadership is so critical, and the point that Nicole's raised, is it a skill? Is it a capability? What is your view in aligning skills, driving the competencies, and creating these outcomes? Kyle, you're on mute. Kyle is on mute. Okay, sorry.
I think, there's a very good comment here from Tujo. Maybe I can quickly address this one. So yes, we do see a lot of transformation roles being advertised on LinkedIn, but I think the point Sanjay and we're trying to make here is yes, you can bring people from the outside. Does it make sense to bring people from the outside? And can those people drive a transformation in the company? So yes, companies are looking, but you have to look at the benefits versus the cost and whether it makes sense.
Yes, I think Tojo, and the point that Nicole's made is very valid, and what Sanjay has said is also that bringing fresh blood will be almost a waste of time if the culture within the organization is not embedded to allow the fresh blood to come in, because otherwise you get a collision between the fresh hires and the old hires, and you end up having a bigger mess than before. But let's come back to those points there, because very interesting points, and I hope to bring Kyle in on the leadership side, because I don't know why I can't connect with him. Kyle, are you with us? Kyle, I think he's having some problem on the connection. Okay, there's another question coming, but before we answer the question, so I want to come back to the next cluster of questions. Whilst many believe that transformation is only about technology, we can all agree that there's more about doing things differently, which implies thinking and behaving in a manner that achieves transformation. So the question again is, what are your thoughts around transformation in the area, and what are the critical issues, the skills considered when talking about transformation? I think we may have covered this point already, Sanjay, but maybe you want to look at about the behaving, thinking, and doing things differently is one of the prerequisites of achieving real transformation.
Perfect. And we said it many times, right? And as you rightly said, transformation is actually about people, processes, and tools. Yeah. And I have always insisted on that. You have people who can actually manage, communicate, create a vision. Then there are different set of people who actually create processes, map the processes, and then there's a different set of people that actually map those into technological and tools, so that you have a complete marriage of a top down, middle layer, and low and a lower level, where you can actually create a whole ecosystem, taking the technology ahead from a transformation perspective. That's what I would add.
That's great. Yeah. Wayne, I want to come back to you, because obviously transformation, as we said, is about the thinking, the behaving, the culture. And you work in a very conservative culture, I would imagine, right? And the transformation is probably more difficult. What is your take on that? How would you like to sort of help us understand how culture affects transformation?
I think a big thing here, and I think it's the same for the rest of the world. But I think you need to look at it not only as a business standpoint, but as a consumer standpoint. So is the change initiated? Can you keep your staff motivated? Does it fit the work style? What needs to be changed in the work style? Japanese were the first to come back to work during COVID season. how can I say, the lifestyle, the living style doesn't allow the changes required. So that's a big process in terms of transformation for Japan. Everything will have to be retaught. Everything will have to be redone, where the rest of the world is already, on top of this. We're quite behind. But I think leaders are working towards, improving things and keeping the work staff motivated and involved.
But how much culture impacting that momentum, Wayne? That was my question, because different countries go different speed, also dictated by the culture of the country.
I think the culture does want. Japanese are known for their long overtime hours, and that hasn't changed. The younger generation, we see that quite a lot, asking to work from home, to even consider changing job. So there's how can I say, probably an ease in that way. But the older generation, the 30s, the 40s, they still want to be here. They still want to be doing this the old way. So transformation is tough.
Kai, great you joined us. I know you've had some technical problems, but I want maybe you've heard the last question. We are talking about doing things differently, thinking, behaving differently, and very much we're talking about leadership and how leadership is fundamental, instrumental in driving transformation and skill set. Would you like to add some comments to this last point we've been talking about?
Well, I jumped in just at the point where I take umbrage to the last statement about older people in their 40s. How dare you?
I should be extremely more violent than you, because I'm a little bit over 40.
Apologies.
No, jokingly. Go ahead.
I thank you for letting me jump in here late. I think that one of the big changes that's happening here, the things that I'm seeing in my customers, is this shattering of hierarchies in a traditional setting. Certainly in an industry like supply chain, working from home in a literal sense means that the power of a headquarters gets diminished, because all of a sudden everybody is now in separate areas. And I think that leads towards different skill sets when it turns to leadership. I think it's understanding some of the hierarchies and how that's changing, how the power structures are shifting a bit.
Right.
I think it means being able to delegate some of that responsibility to others, and to find leaders in different levels across the organization. So we go after what we're calling the L5s, the five levels down from senior leadership.
Right.
That's the areas that I'm looking for the people that are really going to drive transformation change across an organization.
Right. Okay, excellent inputs. Thanks for that, Kyle. So moving on from there, Nicole, what is your organization, or you currently doing in the sphere of transformation? How are all these things coming together in a real life situation? Maybe you're struggling yourself with that, but what do you?
Yeah, I think transformation is a situation where everybody struggles. I think, and it's good because you do get pushed to your limits. Right. And as we all know, learnings only happen outside of a comfort zone, right? So I think transformation in itself can be very good. It's important that leadership takes care of those who may struggle a little bit more with changing mindsets, right? So, I mean, Swarovski at the moment is undergoing one of the most extensive transformations in its 125-year history, right? So if you've been on our website, or if you've seen our shops or our openings lately, you've seen that we are undergoing a complete change in style and product, in how we converse with our customers, more technology driven, more social media focused, all of these things, right? And that's all a part that we're all learning now to work with, right? It's a completely different style. And on top of this external transformation with the different products and the shops going omni-channel, right? We're also transforming our supply chain, right? Because as a key competitive advantage, the supply chain needs to, step up to the plate now and say, okay, you want omni-channel? We're going to deliver omni-channel. So we've done an extensive revamp. We've invested in platforms. Okay. We have, yes, it's been a strain because people need to learn to work differently. Excel spreadsheets and email does not work anymore.
I'll come back to you, Sanjay, in a minute, but I want to pick up a question, because what you've just described to me is your company has become more customer-centric. You've become more focused outside, and you've created a change in mindset, you've changed paradigms. But how has that changed the skill sets within the organization to deliver those outcomes for the customer? Because that's the fundamental thing, the thinking, the doing, the behaving.
Yeah, so I would not say we've become more customer-centric because we were, but what we have shifted is we had a lot of focus on the offline part of the business, and we have changed that to a more online focused part of the business, right? And with that, of course, there comes different skill sets: social media, reacting to social media, finding those influencers, talking with people, having a broad cut through the landscape of our customers and not just focusing on a very few, right?
Okay, so
that definitely is a change in skill set.
Right. So has that improved the employee experience in the company? The things that you're describing, has it improved? Is it a best-in-class practice? If somebody wants to come and work for your company, or they're running away from it? How has that evolved?
Well, I think, looking at the new generation coming.
Right.
Sorry, Kyle.
Okay.
I think looking at, of course, we have become more. We've become fresher. We're more out there. We're more on the Instas, on the platforms where younger consumers is, and at the same time maintaining that. And there's always people who embrace change with open arms, and they're ready to try and do that. And there's always people who are hesitant and who may need a bit more confidence. And this is again where the leadership capabilities come in, right?
Right. Okay.
Do you have the capabilities to recognize when somebody in your team is struggling, and can you help them change?
Okay. And that's the culture that is actually helping in the collaboration and partnering internally.
Yes.
Sanjay, you had a comment on this. Please come in on this point now.
Yeah. Let me first. Yes, thank you. So just to add to what Nicole said twice, actually, as a leader, right, myself, having worked for so many companies and then doing consulting since 2018, one thing that I realize is, as a leader, you yourself should be willing to step into a complete discomfort zone and ready to become vulnerable for a very long duration. It can be from 18 months to 3 years to 4 years. And if you change jobs and move to a different company and do the same thing, you're actually in a discomfort zone and in a vulnerable zone for a long duration. You should getting used to it. Now, who would really want to step into such a role? Tell me, Joe.
Right. Very high risk. I know it's very risky, and it's a very good point you make. But let me bring in a question here. Someone just, as Kevin Parrington from Global Commercial and Compliance leader, he says, would you equate transformation roles to change management? Sounds similar to me. What's the difference between then transformation and change management? Can I bring Kyle into this one here? Do you have a view on that, Kyle?
No. I'm curious to hear whatever other people have to say.
Okay, right. Amos, what do you think?
Every role is transformational, right?
Every role is change management as well, isn't it?
Yeah, the change manager is to manage the entire process of change to reduce the pain point for employee going through the change management process. That's how I see it.
Right.
And transformation role, it's how the role has evolved over the time that the company has transformed.
Okay, so I'm going to throw this out to the audience and to my panel. I think that change management has been around for a long time, and we've been changing processes, we've been changing the technology and everything else. But transformation goes one step further, and it brings in the point that Sanjay brought earlier on. Is about people, and people is about doing things differently, behaving differently, thinking differently. And I think that's the difference that maybe transformation is all about. It's more complete, taking people, process, and technology, versus change management may only be process and technology, and that's maybe the difference. It may be semantics, but it may be very fundamental in changing the course of the discussion. So let me move on to, because there's a few other questions I have to take from the audience there. So looking at the last question in the section, Wayne, what do you see as the fundamental game changers in driving transformation through skill sets? And earlier on, before the discussion, we're talking about skill sets in the service providers, logistics service providers, how they are not changing fast enough to meet the customer requirements. What is your thought about what could be the fundamental game changers in this equation?
For the Japanese side anyway, in terms of fundamental game changer, I think it'd be just to, how can I say? It's a difficult question to answer.
It's not only about technology, right? It's not forcing technology down people's throats going to change, is it?
Yes.
It's a bit more, something more is going to happen.
So
is it mindset?
It's mindset, and it's technology. They're still running on old software, old ERPs, and they're very slow in picking up the ball to make change happen. And I think people are very much anchored into old ways. And maybe not open to that transformation necessarily. But I think it's really important to make that happen. And like Sanjay said, to step out of your comfort zone, right? I don't want to go too long, but for us in recruitment, people business was meeting people. Now it's everything online. It's a different type of skills. It's a different type of activities. Building a tribe instead of meeting people face to face. So same thing with the LSPs.
Okay. Look, I've got some very interesting questions here I want to take from the audience. There's Andy Seat has just asked this question. As we are aware, transformation visions are achieved through cross-functional and team collaborations. How do we inculcate and develop same levels of transformational skill sets across different work functions, departments, and across seniority levels? So this is a question that is really talking about alignment, about visioning, about collaboration. And that is it's a big question, but it's a very loaded question in terms of the disconnects along the way. Amos, would you like to try and have a tackle this one here first? How do you connect and link the organization in terms of the process?
The organizational process for this, I don't want to see them as a very silo, like this department is good at this and this department is good at that. Put them in the entire spectrum of planning. Look into 4 key areas: strategic planning, influencing, relationship building, and execution. And within that department, cross-level, who has what and who has more and who has less, and then make use of the key strengths within the employee, within a certain function. So for example, I may have IT that's really good in execution. And with that, for certain projects, you may want to put the IT and another department together who are very good in influencing. That's where you can have a better transformation, integrated employee experience within that process.
Right. Thanks, Amos. Kyle, I want to come to you because, again, this is about leadership. It's about synchronization of effort, synchronization of visioning, synchronization of investment, identification. From a leadership point of view, how big a challenge is this and how important is it to inculcate this in terms of, again, the cross-functional teams, the collaboration, and integrating from the top down this journey?
So I was just, the reason I'm late is I was just doing a training session with a group, and you know, Zoom has that function where you break people into rooms, and do you want to do it randomly? Yes. Let Zoom randomly shuffle the deck. And I mean, you want to mix it up. You put your CEO with a level 5, and you put them into a side room and let them figure out whatever little project or exercise you're doing. So I think that one of the things that I've seen this year especially is that the trainings have been much more cross-functional, cross business units, and we've been very deliberate to shuffle the deck. And I'm using the technology to let it do it for me. So that's the most random way to go.
Okay. Yeah, but in shuffling the deck and creating maybe more internal disruption, who is then picking up all the balls and picking up all the dust once it falls to the ground? I mean, the question that Kevin Parrington comes back in again and says, is transformation driving internal training and developments to improve employees to succeed? So is there a purpose in shuffling the deck? Is there an outcome that we are looking for? And how do we drive this outcome to the right results?
Yeah, maybe we're putting the cart before the horse. I suppose you need to know what the deck is before you shuffle it. And that's what leadership's job is to define what's the bigger purpose, where are we taking this entire journey. And that, you know, I think one of the transformation changes that's happened in leadership is that they've got to up their game in terms of being able to consistently articulate that across whatever technology platform or whatever varying ways that they're doing that. I'm working with this other company. I think their CEO has done a very good job with using storytelling and going across the intranets in their case, and doing a lot of these types of consistent messaging to define the deck and then let's bring people together, shuffle it up, and then try and sharpen some of the individual pieces within it.
Okay, thanks, Kyle. Sanjay, does this resonate with you in terms of what people are doing or trying to do in terms of shuffling the deck, leadership, synchronization? Or is it just basically random, throw the die, see what happens, and then we form a strategy as we go along down the road?
No, Joe, not at all. I don't resonate with that. Having been myself involved into 3-4 different transformation in the last 10 years with 3 different jobs, I could never have imagined I would have done the same way. For me, the 3 major elements would have been communication, which is define what, when, how, who, create a compelling vision like benefits, what if we don't change, what we'll lose on the table, then create a governance and management process, and then eventually delegate and empower. 3 just broad bullets that I brought into this discussion, Joe.
Okay, great stuff. So let's move on. I've got another question here from Scott Copeland, which I'll ask in a moment. But again, I want to really bring out the point of leadership in advocating, enabling effective transformation. But this is the start all and end all. Kyle, I will again ask you to lead this, but I want to couple the question I just asked you with that Scott Copeland's just asking. Scott is he's a VP Global Transport, Global Logistics Transformation at Schneider Electric. He says, how often have you seen transformation programs fail because they lose sight of the customer in everything they do and focus on internalization, efficiency when under pressure? And again, this comes back to advocating effective transformation. I know you may have covered this in the previous comment, but if you can just address this, I want to move on to Amos the next time round.
So is the question, how often do these things not complete or fall apart before?
Correctly. Yeah, that's right. How often does that transformation fail?
I can give you an anecdote as well as some data. I think that there's some studies that are saying that up to 70% of these efforts end up collapsing or just kind of petering out, and that would be that feels about right to what I've seen. Oftentimes there's great initiative, there's great effort, but then things get confused, distracted, fires pop up, people lose sight of the longer term goals, or the box checking efforts that happen at the beginning start petering out and they don't start reinforcing the same ideas. So from a training standpoint, that's the most frustrating thing, where great, we do a big push the first month or two, and then all of a sudden things start falling away. So I think a majority of these things don't end up coming through the way they had been certainly planned out on spreadsheets.
Right. I suppose the point is that no transformation, no change management journey is always easy. It's always going to have pitfalls, peaks and troughs. The important thing is to pick up the pieces and run. Nicole, in your experience at Swarovski, how has that evolved? I mean, obviously, during your transformation of this new vision, this freshness, there were peaks and troughs. How did that pick up and go? Who was the person picking up the pieces and driving forward? And every time the ball dropped, you picked up and went.
Yeah, so I think what we have done is a really, really great job with transformation ambassadors. So, and this is the part where what Sanjay just said, having that transformation team on top of the organization, very far away, not participating in the business, that usually it's good for governance. Yes, right. No doubt about it. It's good to have that team, but you need to drive this into the organization. And I think this is what at Swarovski we have done really, really beautifully. We've brought people on board. There are brand ambassadors. There are people driving the transformation. You can be a transformation champion. You can put up your hand and say, I want to be a transformation champion. Right. Can I participate in the program? And then those people get brought on board and spread it into the company, right? So you really have this scale effect into the company. There's a lot of engagement on the intranet internally. I mean, we love our new products, so it's an easy sell.
Okay, thanks, Nicole. Sanjay?
Yeah, so great point. Great question by Scott first, and Kyle and Nicole addressed this. I just want to say this. The cost of failure actually could be way cheaper than cost of not transferring yourself and then leaving the revenue on the table or acquiring a new market or a new territory. So today the buzzword in the senior leadership team is actually not in the earlier time shoot and aim. Today, to me, it has changed in the last 2 years is shoot and aim, not aim and shoot. Earlier used to aim and then shoot. Now you shoot, adjust, aim, shoot, adjust, aim, shoot, adjust, aim. So this is a new mantra for me, Joe.
Interesting. Thanks for that input. Amos, I want to come back again to skills because we've gone full circle here. We're talking about change to ambassadors, enablers, etc. So what are the skill sets that we're now talking about for transformation ambassadors, for change agents, for people to enable this this continuity of the transformation journey?
Social skills for one, cognitive skill for two. When we say social skill, it's because as automation kicks in, that higher level of analytical and looking into the information and dissecting that, rethinking in processes requires a high level of building in working in collaboration, and also thinking abstractively and come up with new ways of doing things.
Okay, so Amos, while you, I'd like to just pose this question from Mohammed Akbar. He said, so would it be fair to say the transformation is like change management with added features of changing the company's culture? Are those cognitive skills, are those social skills that are part of that equation, or is something additional now?
I think it's part of the culture. It has to be embedded into the culture. And very importantly is how leaders translate that message down, like what Carl has said, your 5 levels of leadership. You don't want to have your top leadership to have one level of communication, and then when you transcade it down, it all goes in different way, because the touch point is what we are seeing here for a good employee experience. It's with the manager. That's the middle manager that's going to be impactful within an employee experience.
Right. Okay, great. So there's one more question I'd like to take from the field. It said, this is from Albert Tan, an associate professor at Malaysia Institute of Supply Chain, I think. I can't see the end of the line, but he asks, what are the key differences between transformation and re-engineering in the 90s? Maybe you guys are too young to know that, right? So what I'll ask you, okay, I'll ask the question.
Joe, any thoughts on that one?
I'm not too sure if I get it correctly, because I live within a few eras when I'm growing up. I'm still growing. So in the past, where we started the journey of transformation, we are saying that lifelong learning.
Right.
But now we're saying that we need to reskill.
Right.
So what does that mean? You no longer know one skill throughout that journey and you keep on upgrading.
Right.
That transformation has changed. You need to learn multiple skills, because the Gen Z and the Gen Alpha would far do 2-3 jobs much better than one.
Right. Correct. Okay. Any, Nicole, comments from you about this difference between transformation and re-engineering?
No, Joe. Thank you.
Okay. I don't think the date of the 90s means any difference. Sanjay, okay, yeah.
Yeah. So, and I'm from 90s. I'm 1960 born. No issues on that. So, and great question, by the way, right? Re-engineering, it's a 90s term, more manufacturing. And you can imagine they actually are different, Joe. The re-engineering, if I remember correctly, in the 90s was you're re-engineering your work, don't automate, and actually don't obliterate. That's the right word. Whereas transformation can actually include change, re-engineer as well, your processes, your revenue models, your customer integrations, as well as even engineer and technological prowess also. So there are really different. One was more inclusive, one was very much all inclusive. I mean, looking at outside in, one was more inside out.
That's very good. And again, it's very words of wisdom and wise coming from the older guy in the team, and then we're all the younger guys. So time is running short, I'm afraid, and we've got much more to ask. But one question I want to pose to all of you before we go to the closing comments and takeaway is, we've had a very good discussion about what transformation is, what it means on skills, what it means on culture, what it means on basically the behavior. But one thing that is also very important is sustaining this momentum, because the moment you take the foot off the pedal, things go back to normal. How should we position this change, this transformation, such that it's irreversible? That the moment that a leader or the sponsor of transformation leaves the company or takes his foot off the pedal, it doesn't spring back to the old way of working. What are the ingredients we need there? Could I ask to start off with Amos on that?
like I shared earlier on, I think if you give the autonomy back to the employees who forms the main bulk of our organization and see them as a unique and important customer within your organization, any leadership that comes needs to serve them. And so all the plans and all the processes would need to be in tune and in touch and make that engagement for them.
Right. Thank you, Amos. I come back to you, Kyle. Is that workable? I mean, will leaders listen, or will they come with a new style and new leadership and new changes? Because leaderships are sometimes quite adamant in thinking and quite forceful in their way.
Yeah, look, I mean, it's going to be everything in between in this whole messy mix of world. We're complicated people. I think I go back to Nicole's point about the ambassadors in terms of fusing this type of effort across an organization and make it stick. That's another way of saying my L5s. You've got to find the people that get it. They are the culture. Find them and give them that power. And I'd be curious, that would be a really good story to hear more detail about the ambassador program that Nicole was mentioning earlier.
Okay. But for sustaining factors, do you think defining policies and having certain processes and procedures embedded in the organization can continue that methodology through? Sanjay, what do you think?
Yeah, can I give you a best-in-class kind of an example here of a company? Will that be okay?
Yes, if you could. The time is running. Yeah,
quick one. So there is a company which deals in confectionaries and chocolates, and they have a performance review sustaining policy which is digitized. It's called either 222, 2+2+2, or 1+1, and every digit denotes something. One denotes a geography, the other digit denotes a business unit you come from, and then the third digit denotes the function you drive. And as you actually move from one geography to another, you could actually say now instead of 1+1, because everybody starts at one geography, one function, and one role. So yeah, 1+1+1. The moment you change a role or a geography, it becomes 1+1+2. And as you start increasing your digit, when you become 2+2+2, that means you are actually due for promotion, you're due for change, you're due for transformation in some other function or some other role. And that's a classic example for me. How do you actually get your employees through the echelons and become leaders for future? And that goes back to the point that Nicole made. If you don't do something today for next 3 years, when you go to the 3 years, you haven't done much because you didn't think of it.
Okay, thanks. Can I bring Wayne in this? Wayne, in terms of changes and sustaining, would policies and procedures be one way to make sure you have consistency and sustainability of the change and transformation you've achieved?
For once more, Joe.
Sorry, I said, would it, to sustain your transformation initiatives, once you got through the change management and you've actually introduced your transformation objectives, how do you sustain them? Would policies, with procedures, with methodologies maintain that coherence to make sure that the next generation carries on and builds on that? Or is there some other way it could be done?
For us, we've implemented a weekly teach back program where the employees are actually running it. And so we have selected topics and we give them the power to basically upscale or upskill everyone in the office because the way one person run one thing could be maybe upgraded or upscaled by someone else. So it's a weekly program that's run by them and they basically run the show. So it's really keeping them motivated, keeping them involved, and bringing learning into this.
The Kaizen methodology. Does anyone remember the Kaizen methodology? Okay, so Nicole, how are you going to see the sustaining good work that's been done at the Swarovski now? How is that going to continue? What is your role? What is your colleagues' role to looking to the future to maintain the good achievement so far and growing even further?
I think we're on a very good way. So I think we just need to keep doing what we're doing right now. Continue the good communication that we have from leadership. And I mean like huge town halls where everybody can feel really, really close to the leadership, and leadership is explaining to you what's going to happen next, what has happened so far, why are we doing this, and how we can support that business. And I think those touch points, those are very, very important touch points, because any information that missed out from the way on the top to level 5 is going to be repeated in those town halls. So that's for me a very, very important component of the communication that we're driving.
So it's communication, engagement, sustaining, but again, it also comes down to style of the manager, the leader, right? Because that sometimes could be someone's very keen and someone's very introvert will not do that.
No, I could not say that our leaders are introverted.
Right. I'm afraid we're out of the time. We've actually overrun. So I need to ask all of you to, in your closing statements and a takeaway comments you'd like to share and leave with us on skills transformation or whatever you think is appropriate. So can I start with Kyle? Kyle, would you like to give us your takeaway? Because obviously it's been a very in-depth discussion. There's a lot more we can talk about.
I think there's some really cool points that have come up here today. I mean, it fits into the framework that I've been thinking about, which is this collapse of hierarchy and the importance of those ambassadors, those L5s. The leadership style has gone from one of potentially more traditional hierarchy and power to one that knows how to distribute in different ways, to use new technologies to do that, and to allow these young kids, these young 40-year-olds, some runway to take over.
Okay, so collapse of the hierarchy, a transfer to transformation ambassadors with skills, tools, and new technologies, right? Interesting. Okay, Nicole?
Yes, so for me, the key takeaway here is that transformation is driven by people and not by systems. So you can throw millions of dollars into fancy new systems. If you don't have the people on board with you, it's not going to work out.
Right, excellent. Sanjay?
Yeah, thank you. So key takeaway, transformation is hinged on 3 pillars: people, which is communication, process, governance and management, and tools, technology, as much as required, but not for the sake of technology and not more.
Excellent, very good. Amos?
My key takeaway would be to focus on the well-being of the employee. I think it's important that way, primarily because then you know what they need, you know what they are, why they are suffering, what they are suffering, and how you can help them within an organization. That's going to be a key part, because you improve on well-being, you improve their engagement, that improves on performance.
Right, excellent. Wayne?
Same as Nicole. Transformation will be led by the people, and to keep them motivated and to make them comfortable with being comfortable with the discomfort of change is important.
Employee experience. Okay, that's great. Okay, listen, thank you all very much for your excellent inputs. We've run over by 10 minutes, but it was worth it. My apologies to all the audience who sent in questions that we could not take, unfortunately, but really appreciate the inputs. We've had a very good discussion. Again, thank you to Kyle, Nicole, Sanjay, Amos, and Wayne for your contributions. And I pass back to Bob, who will close the session as the procedure dictates.
Yeah, yes, thanks, Joe, and thanks to all our 5 panelists for that very engaging panel session, and particularly it's good to see so many questions coming in on this topic of transformation. So we are going to have a break now for about 1 hour. We're going to resume in the plenary session for the final plenary session of LogiSYM 2021 at 1:45. So as I keep saying, do engage with the exhibitors over in the exhibition section, and there is the networking platform as well for you to go and take a look at. So until then, see you at 1:45.
Thank you, Bob. Thank you, everybody.
See you later, Bob.